I assume now that the building in question was probably a retirement home, although in high school we treated it like it was an abandoned mental ward, but we referred to it as the old folks' home. It was one of our greatest desires to explore it, and we completely expected, secretly wished, to have a terrifying experience. Everyone agreed that the place was haunted, although it wasn't, and I don't believe in that stuff anyway. It had been abandoned for as long as any of us could remember, just on the outskirts of our small town in Middle America. There were 4 of us who explored the grounds and later the interior in episodic increments, discovering more each time. The first time we were brave enough to go, it was just before dark. The place was locked up tight. The second time, a door at the back had its glass window smashed out. This should have been our first clue to stay away, as it was glass with lines of wire through it. Some of it hung out the window with a little dried blood on it. One of us reached through and turned the handle from the inside to open the door. With the windows boarded up, no moonlight lit the hallways, and we only had one flashlight. We went down 2 hallways. All the rooms along the way were empty except for 1 or 2 with a lone chair or bed frame. We discovered that there was a second floor and a basement, but we didn't get a chance to explore more because a red light attached to a car battery freaked one of us out. He thought it was an alarm or something. Anyway, we scoped it out for a few weeks and made sure there weren't security patrols or anything weird like that. We never knew who owned it. Somebody had to own it. Nobody looked after it, aside from mowing the lawn once a month. We returned the 3rd time with the intention of mapping the place out. I wanted to find some kind of cool antique or something. We were all freaked out by the darkness and the idea of ghosts, but none of us considered the possibility of other people being in the building. In the basement, we finally found creepy signs of other visitors, but it wasn't until the last minute that things really started to go wrong. There was one room with a dirt floor and a Christmas tree planted in the middle of it, as in it was a decorated pine tree, tinsel, beer cans, and paper clowns. Beer cans and empty liquor bottles encircled the room, a ridiculous amount of them. The door to the room was like a cell door, metal bars and a broken lock. One of us waited at the door because he kept hearing someone, and he called to us with an update as we found a bunch of buried Christmas trees at the back of the room. "I think I hear someone," he whined his catchphrase. We had varying theories about the room. It was all new stuff as far as we could tell, not as dusty as everything else in the building. All in all, it was more odd than creepy. The room at the end of the hall had lights hanging from the ceiling, smashed to pieces, glass covering the floor. A staircase at the back led upward to an area we hadn't seen yet. There were chairs and desks clogging the way, splinters and nails pointing every direction. Everything happened in a flash. There was a creak, then a door slammed shut down the hall, and we scurried over the desks and chairs to the ground floor. The door there was locked, so we continued to the second floor, which was unknown to us. We sprinted down the hall, and a doorway to our right caught our attention. Inside was a mattress. On the floor next to it was a giant tub of peanut butter and a pair of stained underwear. It depends on who you ask what the stains were. I would guess that they were stained with feces, but the guy who kept hearing things said it was blood. The silence as we took in the room was deafening. Probably a homeless person lived there. Nothing sinister. I stepped into the doorway to try and see more, and as soon as I saw the upside-down cross on the wall, we heard wood snapping in the stairway we had come from. Not just someone coming up, but legs of chairs being broken. We bolted down the hall and found another staircase to get back to the ground floor and exit the building. We made it a block away and stopped to catch our breath. Everything was still for a moment, and then a car pulled out from behind the abandoned building and sped toward us. We ran again and didn't stop until we were back at my friend's house. None of us had a clue about anything we saw there. We didn't know if we should be worried or anything. We just hadn't seen enough, really. We never went near it again, and a year later it was demolished. A Holiday Inn stands where the old folks' home once was. I don't care if anything creepy was actually taking place, but I'm glad we never met the residents of the abandoned retirement home. I live in a smallish town in New Zealand. In my area, there is, or was, an abandoned mental asylum that got closed down due to things like abuse of the patients and other issues. It is located deep in a valley away from civilization, and the locals at the time shared ghost stories and the like. The stories ranged from actual ghosts to old patients who had been left up there to die coming back and walking the wards. Basically, everyone knew weird stuff went on up there. At the time, the place was fully closed and empty except for a few things, and lots of people had managed to break into the boarded-up buildings and walk in the wards and so on. In fact, the swimming pool that the patients used back in the day was still being used for disabled people. There is a very strange old man who lives up there and is like the caretaker of the land. We all knew what he looked like. Some friends and I decided we would go up there for the fun of it. None of us believe in ghosts, and we still don't. So we headed up the valley, found a bush to hide our bicycles in, and left one friend who didn't want to come at the bottom to tell us if any police or the old man were coming, via cell phone text. I personally had a really strange feeling about the whole thing. I am very intuitive, but the feeling was outweighed by the excitement. However, the strange feeling kept growing, and as the day went on, it turned into an "I feel like we're being watched" feeling. We came to the abandoned buildings. They were spooky but cool. They were boarded up, but my friend, who was quite strong, managed to rip some of the boards off, and we went inside. It was what you'd expect from an abandoned mental asylum that many other people had broken into. Lots of rooms, all trashed. The only ghostly thing that happened was in one particular room, where all of our cell phones had no reception, but everywhere else it was fine. It didn't bother us at all. We kept walking around for a bit in the main building. I still felt weird. My cell phone went off. It was the friend we left at the bottom of the valley telling us the old man had found him and told him he called the cops and that they were on their way. The main building had bushy hills behind it, so we ran up there to hide. I got my phone out to see how the friend was going, but no cell phone reception. So we were hiding in some bushes. I still felt like we were being watched. About 15 minutes went by, and from our hiding spot we saw that no cop car had gone past the main building yet. We decided to walk a little further into the woods and to try to walk over to the next valley and go all the way down, so as not to go the main way and encounter the police or the strange old caretaker. Suddenly, we came across a weird building structure coming out of the hillside. Imagine a house being buried into a hillside with only the roof visible and the rest of the building underground. We obviously thought this was very strange. Even weirder, the only way into or out of this building seemed to be a latch on the roof. As curious teenagers, we needed to know what was inside. My strong friend tried opening the latch. It was locked, or so old and rusty that it couldn't be opened. We almost walked away when we decided we could probably just rip the corrugated iron roof off and see what was inside. After lots of tries, we got it off. We were all kneeling around the hole we had made. It was pitch black inside. We argued about who should go in. There was no way I was going in, but we played a paper, scissors, rock to see who would. I didn't have to go in, one of my friends did. We helped him down. There were no stairs or ladder from the latch door. He fell quite a bit and twisted his ankle a little. We could only hear him in the pitch black below. He turned on his cell phone torch. From what we could see above, it was 2 rooms separated by a concrete wall. In the room we could see best, there appeared to be a bed, a chair, some very old magazines, and old, opened and consumed cans of food. My friend below confirmed all of this and then let out a huge, "What the hell?" and then threw a human skull up to us. At that point, my friend was like, "Get me out of here." So we all put our hands down and helped him out. At that very point in the trees further up the hill, a big branch fell from a tree. I said to my friends, "Let's get out of here." We followed our original plan of walking over to the next valley and going all the way back down that way. We found where we needed to go and started walking down a hill, which was no longer trees and bush. It was just farmland with cows and sheep on it. We were walking down the hill in a single file line. I was at the back. I felt a strong hand on my shoulder and turned around. There was a man about 40 in full camouflage gear, with an old school World War I type rifle pointed at my face. Guns aren't that easy to obtain in New Zealand. He did not look normal at all, and he was not the old man who looked after the land. He said, "What are you doing here?" We said, "We just came to explore and shoot our BB gun around." He said, "No, you're lying to me. I have been following you since you put your bikes down. What were you doing at the old shed down there? Who do you work for?" We said, "Just an old shed, is it?" He said, "I'm asking the questions here." At this point we were terrified, but my strong friend wasn't scared. He could fight very well when he needed to and knew some kung fu. At that point he was sick of this guy pointing a gun in our faces. He quickly grabbed the gun and they fought over it for a bit. Then it fell and rolled down the hill and we ran. We turned back and saw the man smiling at us evilly. He yelled, "If you tell anyone about anything you've seen, you're all dead. I know your names and he is waiting for you by your bikes." The he was the old man, the caretaker. He was waiting by our bikes. The other friend who waited at the bottom was gone. This part was weird because he and the camo rifle guy must have had walkie-talkies or something. The old man said, "If we ever see any of you up here again, you won't be leaving as easily. If you talk about what you saw, I will know and I will find you. We know your names." We asked, "What did you do with our friend?" He laughed and said, "He ran away and left you. He's probably with the cops at the gate." We found our friend just further down where the public road starts by himself. He also had a gun pulled on him by the old man, so he ran away. No police showed up. I don't really know how to end this story, but something very strange happened up there. I've even seen the old man at the supermarket years after this incident took place, and he gave me a very strange look. Some things to note. The police never came, perhaps they were never called. Since this happened years later, all remnants of the main buildings have been suspiciously burnt down. Anyway, hopefully I don't meet them again. Also, I will happily answer any of your questions when I can. I actually think I can remember exactly where this weird shed was and could take someone there. My personal theory about the shed is that, when the place got closed down, there was nowhere for some of the more severely insane patients to go, and no family cared. So they possibly threw them into these weird chambers to die in the hills. Another theory about the camo guy with the gun is that he may have been a patient there ages ago, because he did not look sane at all. I've wanted to express this story for many years now, and watching scary story YouTube videos about this subreddit has only made me want to share it more. It's always at the back of my mind, so maybe writing it down will help me be less anxious. This happened when I was 13 years old. You know the days. Listening to your parents' records for hours. Hanging out at the mall. Talking about boys at sleepovers. This was one of those sleepovers. My best friend Sadie had come to my house for such an event. I'll refer to her by her nickname S. Both of us were quite short and skinny. She had ginger hair and blue eyes, while I had dark blonde hair and green eyes. We were both pale and had freckles. We were your average 13-year-old girls, if that's good enough of a description. S and I had many differences, personality and interest-wise. We got into fights sometimes, but there was one thing we both loved equally: exploring and adventure. Seriously, a couple of years later we tried to hop a train to Mexico, but that's a different story. S and I got the bright idea while sitting around the house to go check out this railroad that had areas of flooding. We planned on just messing around, catching frogs and snakes, climbing trees and haystacks, something most kids would end up doing in a dreary and desperate town like ours, and most American Midwestern towns. It wasn't small enough for everybody to know everybody, but it wasn't Los Angeles either. So yeah, basically we were in serious need of something exciting to happen. We rode to the tracks on our bikes near miles of cornfields and a medium-sized gathering of trees which lined the tracks. It was summer, so we had quite a bit of sunlight left in the late afternoon. We did what we planned in the small lake of water, but both of us wanted more than a few snake bites and turtles to pick up and examine. So we got the bright idea to follow the tracks. I had never been down there, and eventually we would realize that we shouldn't have even thought about it. But we were young and stupid, and we did it anyway. At first, not much happened. We passed a few industrial areas and saw some deer, but eventually we came to a bridge in the distance. It was clearly active with cars driving on it, so I didn't have many worries. It was more open, which put me at ease as well. Under the bridge, we saw graffiti, the crappy kind. Swastikas mostly, real classy. It made the area feel a bit more eerie. Typical trash you'd find under a bridge was there. Beer cans, lighters, and even a few condoms. Where we were was coming into view. The infamous downtown. The only place in this non-escapable town that was moderately interesting. We crossed an ancient bridge that stretched over a river to lead to downtown. I was excited to find a route that I could easily escape from if needed. We messed around for a while, throwing rocks into the river below and taking pictures of the scenery with my cheap camera. It was dark when we decided to go back to the tracks. It was an ordinary day with us, really, and we turned around to go back the way we came. Big mistake. The tracks were abandoned, but trains were the least of our problems. We ended up taking a wrong turn. Yeah, I know. But everything looked the same, and coming back from the bridge, these tracks looked like the ones we came from. Perspective is a tricky thing. Like idiots, we kept going down it. I'm kind of a scaredy cat, so S was in front of me the entire time. We came across a couple of tents in the trees. Many tents, actually. Weird. I don't remember walking past these, I said. Immediately, I knew it was a dangerous situation, but S was intrigued, so I tagged along. The tent nearest to us looked raggedy, so I thought they were abandoned. Like complete morons, instead of realizing we'd gone the wrong way and turning back, we went to check it out. Flies were everywhere, and it sure didn't smell pleasant. Then I saw a man, a little ways off, sitting with what seemed to be another man, possibly more with even more tents. It was either a homeless camp or a group of hunters camping illegally. I was shy and knew that homeless people, at least in our town, weren't the nicest of individuals. At this point, I wanted to be anywhere but there. I whisper-screamed to S that we had taken the wrong way and we turned around immediately. I wish it ended there. As we were walking back, we heard a rustling in the trees. It scared me crapless, but I assumed it was a deer. We walked more and then I heard it again. We both looked back and there he was, maybe about 20 feet behind us, a man standing in the trees. In an instant we darted and he kept a steady distance behind us. I was a weak child and I couldn't run for long. I had a history of a weak immune system and heart, so I needed to stop. I couldn't stop, but tripping on God knows what and falling did it for me. A track runner at the time, shouted for me to get up, but all that did was make her run back to me in a desperate attempt to pick me up. He came closer and I was out of breath. At this point I could make out some features. He was tall, probably 6 foot or taller. He wore a black sweatshirt, a ski mask, and camouflage pants. I couldn't see much of his face because of the mask, but enough to know he was serious. This is where S saved both of our lives. "Turn around or I'm screaming my head off," she shouted. She brandished a knife and we all knew that houses were very close to where we were. He ran off into the woods. I gathered myself and we biked our asses home. I never told my parents what happened and I never went back down those tracks. S, if you're somehow reading this, thank you. Thank you so much. Because without your quick thinking and courageousness, we could very well be dead. And to that asshole who ran after us, let us please not meet. I am going to preface this by saying I was incredibly naive. My best friend Jay used to work at a restaurant in a very bad area. She had moved there from our little suburb about 35 minutes away. I still lived in the suburb with my parents, so my street smarts weren't the best. This was 3 years ago. I was 19 at the time, and driving around to visit friends was, and still is, one of my favorite pastimes. One day I had decided to stop by the restaurant to see Jay, as I had done a few times before, and I was friends with all her coworkers. My friend was busy and she made me wait around with a few of the others for a bit until their break, then came to chat with me. At this time I was very anti-purse and just kept a wristlet, a little wallet you can keep around your wrist. After chatting for about 30 minutes, I left the restaurant and walked back to my car. After driving for a while, I realized I had left my wallet, so I texted Jay, telling her to grab it for me and where I had probably left it. I already knew there was a possibility that it was gone, since I had left it in a busy restaurant in Center City, and Jay confirmed it was indeed gone. My dad canceled all the credit cards, but I was still holding on to hope that it would be returned, since I did have my ID in there. The next day, I got a text from Jay. She told me someone had called the restaurant and said they had my wallet, and that she had given them my number. I was really happy about this, but I knew I would have to meet up with a stranger, so I decided not to tell my parents. I didn't get another text until the next morning. The person said that they had my wallet and wanted to give it back, but never gave a name or description. I didn't care. I thanked them profusely and asked when I could meet them. Hours later, they replied with an address and told me to stop by around 9 p.m. The address was about 20 minutes from the restaurant, which was also a really bad area. That didn't worry me much since I had left my wallet right around there. I got there around 9, and this is when I started to get freaked out. The house looked like it was previously a row home, but the one connecting it to the rest had been demolished. The windows were boarded up and there were no lights coming from inside. The place was obviously abandoned. Grass overgrown, weeds everywhere, graffiti all over it. The door, however, was not boarded up and I could see it was ajar. I texted the number and the person replied a second later, telling me to come in. It was early summer, so while it wasn't completely dark yet, it was getting there, and I would have needed a flashlight to see. So what did I do? I turned on my flashlight, of course. I got out of the car and looked around, hoping to see someone. Nothing. With phone flashlight in hand, I started walking up the dry, rotted wooden steps to the front door. I cracked the door open further. It was completely black inside. When I shined my flashlight around, I could see there was no furniture. I thought I heard some quiet creaking from the upstairs, which seemed strange. Why would the person text me to come in but then be hiding upstairs? At this point, I knew something was wrong. I was scared as hell, and I hightailed it back to my car. I should have pulled around the corner, but I didn't. I just called the police right there. 2 policemen arrived shortly after and walked right into the house with flashlights. Then 2 more officers pulled up. They were inside for a long time and then they came out. With them in handcuffs were 2 skinny, scraggly, homeless-looking guys. I only got a good look at one, but I remember that he had visible sores on his face and arms. I assumed they could be drug-related. As the cops walked them by my car, one of the guys looked at me with the angriest expression I have ever seen. 2 of the officers came over to talk to me and confirmed that they had indeed found my wallet inside. All the money was gone, but the rest was intact. The cops reprimanded me for being so stupid. I drove home and never spoke of it to my parents. Only recently have I told them what happened. I'll never know what those guys were planning. Was it just someone messing with me and I called the cops on 2 random homeless guys living there? I never got another text from that number. I started carrying a purse after that. Creepy abandoned house men. Let's never meet again. Ever. One of my favorite activities is exploring old abandoned buildings. I've seen quite a few strange things during these trips, but one experience still creeps me out to this day. A few years ago, I found a long-forgotten water refinery with the help of online exploration communities and Google Earth. Although it's probably stupid, I always go to places for the first time alone, partly for the thrill and partly because if something bad were to happen, I would feel terrible having brought someone else into that situation. So I made plans to head there the next day after my classes let out. The day of the trip, I packed up my camera and water bottle and set off following my hand-drawn map, the downside of not having a printer. After an hour or 2 of biking, I finally arrived at the place. Luckily, there was an old bike path that dead-ended just past it. The area was completely overtaken by vegetation, with trees growing up through and around the buildings. Not to mention the buildings themselves were just disintegrating, with paint peeling off every wall and ceiling. I took my time scouring each of the buildings for anything interesting. I found hundreds of broken windows, some weird broken spheres, and some kind of giant oven. After an hour or 2 of successful exploring, I decided to head off, happy with an SD card full of pictures. Soon after, I pulled my bike back out through the hole in the fence I had entered and started biking away. That's when I remembered there was one last shot I wanted to get. I'm pretty insistent on getting the shots I want, and I didn't know if I would ever come back. So I decided to just tough it out, ride back and take the picture. As I was going back, I saw a lone man dressed in old clothes walking down the bike trail away from the dead end. I thought it was a strange path for someone to take a walk on, and something in me said, "Don't let him see you go in there." I biked past him, gave him a slight head nod, and figured I'd bike all the way to the end of the trail, turn around, and by the time I got back, he'd be long gone. Having continued in the opposite direction, I leisurely made my way to the end, turned around, and as I headed back toward the hole in the fence, I saw him there, staring at me, walking back toward the dead end from which he came. He had a happy look on his face, but it wasn't the kind of happiness that made me feel at ease. The best way I could describe it is that he looked like he had just been told a very dirty joke and was trying to contain it. I knew I had to do something as I was literally trapped between him and a dead end. I decided to play it cool, but stay ready to drop everything and run if things got hairy. As I got closer and closer, I could see his facial expression more clearly. He was not someone I wanted to be in the same state with, let alone on the same bike path. I silently cursed myself for going back for one picture as I slowly approached. Finally, I was about 20 feet away from him when he called out, "I sure would like a ride. It's so hot out, mind if I jump on?" As soon as I heard this, I realized that this was no longer my brain falsely interpreting something as creepy. I picked up speed and rushed past him, putting as much space between us as I could. I looked back and saw that he had once again turned around and was following me. At this point, I bolted, sprinting down the bike path and back onto the road. Interestingly, I stopped at a nearby gas station on the way home to get a refill on my Gatorade. I saw a cop there and told him I had just ridden down the old bike path by this park. He looked at me, sort of bewildered as to why a person would ride out there. Or at least that's what I guessed from behind his sunglasses. He told me he didn't recommend people going there, especially alone, as some shady characters like to hang out there,